the transfer window, right? Because I wrote a piece on my Substack that was like mainly saying, well, Maresca and his players have kind of done their job, stepping up to the pressure. It's now on the sporting directors to show that they can step up when required, which obviously is a big thing. And I think, if you're someone who's been very defensive of Maresca, even through the difficult times, I think the counter argument is always, well, he doesn't have the right players, or the players or the transfer windows that he's been there for have not been good enough to give him greater depth, greater players. And I guess whether you want to tackle that or just, we move on directly to the transfer window. I mean, for me, it is a very decisive transfer window because if we come anywhere close to last summer, I think that would just be really, really depressing given what's just happened. But also just like, surely now there's got to be a turn of being more serious and actually, constructing a squad that is superior because you've got the Champions League now. The Club World Cup, that it's going to be a Premier League that demands a lot more than just qualifying for the Champions League. At the very least, some hint of a serious title challenge, which we haven't seen for a long period of time. So just tackling and looking ahead to a transfer window that I do think is massive, obviously, for Chelsea.
If I'm Maresca or Maresca's agent or representatives or whatever it's going to be, I am going to the football board, Win Stanley. I'm going to the crew that run the club, Shields, the whole kabang, and being like, I've got the side back into the Champions League. I've had one striker largely for the entire season and a kid from Barcelona who got injured, unfortunately. I've had to play Moises Caicedo for 3 billion minutes throughout the season because, Lavia has been, again, unfortunately, injured for the majority of the season. And we've not had anyone really to step in there and deputise him. I've lost Mudryk, although I don't know if he's really a negative at this point, but Mudryk, for the season. And even then, some of the guys that they brought in who were being touted as huge solutions didn't really contribute a ton of goals or assists or weren't really super, super productive that potentially you would want. I've lost Fofana for large parts of the season. And again, when he was fit, potentially, if he's fit for the whole season, he's in with a shout for player of the season. He was absolutely fantastic, in terms of his progress. Obviously, Reece is injured in and out of the squad. He's got probably at the start of the season, like no real clear picture of who his number one goal is. There is so much in the squad composition, the way that the squad has been constructed, what he was left with to sort of play from last summer until after the Betis game, that I am now going to the board and saying, look, I have got fourth. I've got the trophy in the bag now. Like, give me the tools to genuinely go and compete with Liverpool and say Arsenal, but I mean, we're not actually that far behind them in terms of the table. Go and compete with Liverpool. I'm sure City will bounce back next season. There'll be improvements from other clubs as well. Go and give me the tools to compete with these teams. Now, I've shown you what I can do with still a little bit of a hodgepodge squad, a squad that doesn't quite have the balance in the right areas. And I think that would be the thing I'll be doing. And you are completely, completely right. Maresca has more than held up his end of the bargain, regardless of style, regardless of any critique that I might have throughout the season. He delivered top four. He delivered Champions League. We are back where we need to be as a football club. And he won a trophy along the way. Like, wipe your hands, fantastic. Like, now it is on the club's duty, or the club now have a duty, in my opinion, to give him those players. I think personally, you're looking for a long-term partner for Levi Colwill. I think Trev's been great. I think Fofana is great when he's fit. You might be thinking who is going to be that long-term partner and create that stability. Colwill has gone from looking a little bit shaky at times this season, and I say that as a huge, huge fan of his, looking a bit shaky, to probably looking like he's England's first choice left-sided centre-half as we finish up this season. Go and find my partner for him. You've got arguably one of the most athletic and powerful midfields potentially next season. I've got my name as Tweedy Santos here. I'm clearly just supporting Andre Santos coming back to the club. I think he's a phenomenal talent, and he's going to add an awful lot of firepower, energy, strength into midfield. Ekiteke, Hugo, you've got all of these players that are going to come in and actually give you the ability to let Moises Caicedo have a night off, which I think next season, 50, 60 games you want to play, he's going to have to rest in the cup. We're going to have to try and pick our moments with him in terms of resting as well. So midfield for me sorted. Then it's a question of firepower. Cole Palmer, we saw this season when he dipped in terms of form and individual performance, the goals weren't coming, the results weren't coming, the performances weren't quite there. Jackson, for me, still a bit hit and miss. The discipline stuff, I'm not entirely sure that he is a first-class caliber, going to win you a league title or compete for a league title level player. So you need your reference point, you need your number 9. If that is going to be Delap +1, I'm not entirely sure what they're doing there, but you need somebody up there that is going to get you 20 goals minimum in terms of the league. And then potentially you're looking for a wide player that's going to score. I don't think Neto is ever going to be a 10, 15, 20 goal a season player. Palmer clearly has that capability. Madueke, if we can get more out of him and more consistency, I think has the ability to chip in with like a Willian or Pedro, 10, 15 goals, absolutely fine across all comps. Those sorts of players I think are fine, but I think we need, if you're going to have a centre forward that is, not a freak of nature who's going to get you 30, 40 goals, you need somebody up top who's got that sort of goal scoring mentality. So I think possibly, before when we spoke February, I would have said we need 11 starting players to go into next season. Not quite in terms of extreme. But I think now realistically, and I'm even giving Sanchez a bit of a due here, since he stopped trying to pretend that he's Andrea Pirlo at the back and he's been told not to sort of try and play slide rule passes like he's playing goals in South London, to sort of find people and stuff like that. He's actually been pretty decent in goal. I know he's got the best save percentage in the league. I think the high fuck ups, basically, the real visceral moments that you remember of him outweigh probably some of his performance. So I don't think he's as big an issue, and I think you can get away with him, and maybe there is something there in terms of him. But centre back, go get me a striker, go get me a winger that gets goals. Adding all of those guys back into midfield, I think you've got an opportunity next season. As I say, if Reece James is playing more often than not, again, another player that you just don't play him in the Cup, don't play him in the League Cup, don't play him in the FA Cup, play him in the Champions League, play him in the right Premier League games, but get him playing, like he is a completely transformational player in this team. So when we're looking at it's you've got to now 3, maybe 4. If we're going to sign 2 forwards, you've got to now 4 signings, which, given we've signed 7,000 trillion players since Clearlake have come in and we've spent, the GDP of a small country, you would hope that this summer, if it's targeted and it is not about potential, it's not about someone's talented, it's about somebody that's going to come in and be a definitive difference maker, needle mover, whatever terminology you want to use, but somebody or players that come in and definitively upgrade those 4 positions and are like, right, I am going to be a default starter because I'm that good. This is about adding to the squad now. And then obviously your depth increases in quality because people that were starting this season become players that are rotation options. But the pressure is on them now to deliver, which, frankly, as I say, given what Maresca has done this season, with really, like, in some cases, like less than a player, playing everyone, Tyreek George up front, like playing everybody bar himself up front at times in matches. The fact that he's finished top 4 is incredible. He's done his part. Now the club have got to hold up their end of the bargain. Whatever they do, obviously we'll kind of time will tell. Keep forgetting that Esteval's coming in, and we'll do the tempering of that he's not going to potentially come in and be Lionel Messi, Neymar combined with Ronaldinho, like all rolled into one within the first 5 seconds of him playing. But how they handle his transition, how they handle his acclimatization to the Premier League is always going to be important. But there are some very positive things happening. I just think they need to get finally starting caliber players that are good enough and that are going to push us in the right direction. If they don't, then it's the same way we started this season. You've got Jackson up front who is hit and miss. You're hoping Palmer pulls ridiculous amounts of goals out of his belt. Enzo Fernandez puts up like a Lampard 20-goal season. Santos chips in with 10 goals in midfield. It's a lot of pressure in weird positions. So get them right, and we'll see where we go from there.
I've obviously the striker one is I think such a complex. In some ways it's obvious, but like I've had many conversations with people because we've done the whole buying the big striker so many times and it not working, and even I still firmly believe that like Lukaku at the time when we bought him made a lot of logical sense. And there's a lot of reasons. I know I remember quite distinctly you were on Alex's podcast and at the time Alex Goldberg's podcast, and during that Tuchel season and why it didn't work and all of that. I don't want to relitigate that, but just obviously there is PTSD about going in for the obvious striker. I feel like the two big names that everyone's talking about at the moment is obviously Viktor Gyökeres and Victor Osimhen. Are either of those two names the sort of names that you're thinking of if you're envisioning like the profile of a ready-made player who's going to seriously upgrade on the options, or do you have some concern that we may be walking into a similar trap?
So I think I'm probably open enough to admit that what I'm looking for probably doesn't exist in the market. So therefore, I'm always thinking. I'm already thinking about what is the best case scenario here. Um, you know, both Victors in terms of profile. Osimhen for me probably was the closest one that I wanted to sign, but a gajillion pound a week wages and whatever it would take to get him in a Chelsea shirt. I don't know, again, if you are going to guarantee that he is going to be at the price point he'll come in at, like a 30 goal a season, 40 goal a season player across all comps kind of level. So I'm probably looking at what is going to be the best case, in terms of, I'm not going to call them secondary tier because I think that's the tier that really is probably where the value is. It seems quite likely that Liam Delap is going to sign for Chelsea, at £30 million if there is still upside and development in him as a player. I still probably think, given the amount of youth football I used to watch back in the day, still probably the best academy centre forward I've ever seen play at any level. He was, and I'm including like Tammy and even Solanke at Chelsea, like who scored like 50 goals in a season. I think Liam Delap was incredible. Whether you can really profile him based on Ipswich, I don't really know, particularly in the Prem. But there is I'll call him like a Diet Coke Diego Costa in my head, is the way that I kind of see Delap sort of profile. He has the chippiness and the nastiness and the work rate of a Costa. I don't quite know if he has that just insanely unbelievable scruffy quality to finish from anywhere in the penalty area. And equally, Costa used to score some incredible goals as well. So, you have that ability there. But from a physical standpoint and from a personality standpoint, he feels quite Chelsea number 9 that I would like. But I don't necessarily have seen the output, or really, when I've watched him at Ipswich, I haven't sat there and gone, oh, he can definitely play at a high level. He's been incredible, etc., etc. I know he scored against us, whatever it is, but at that point in the season, I think I probably could have scored against us in some of those games. So I'm not quite giving him the kudos there. So he feels like he's going to come, but if he does, I still think that you might need another one, a slightly different profile as well. There are a few people that are very big on Ekiteke. I think he is, again, you might have concerns about his physicality. He is, 13 foot tall and built like a pencil, but I think there is a strength there that is quite similar to an Isak in terms of how they're built and how they can cope. Maybe an adaptation period there, but again, he's not a €100 million player, and if that's what it's going to take to get somebody in who is 6 or 7 out of 10, in terms of guaranteed to do well here, maybe I don't think it's quite there. So again, we're in a very tough position because as much as I love to actually quite berate the club for some of the signings they've made, I see the market here at the moment is quite tricky for them to navigate. So while it is, to your point, a very complex position, and Chelsea have often done really weird and wonderful things with players who aren't, Costa wasn't a huge money signing, wasn't massively obvious. Drogba, when we bought him, was big money. But again, players that have done well, it's not a position that we typically have an unbelievable player in. Like probably the last really good Chelsea number 9, and I might be forgetting somebody here, which is fine. It's probably like Giroud, that kind of sort of player in terms of big games, in terms of goals, in terms of bringing others into play. So it also depends a little bit on what we're after. I wouldn't mind having a centre forward who is a bit Giroud in the sense that he may get you 15, 20 goals potentially across all comps, but you can bang the ball into him, you can play people off of him, you can bring people into play, Palmer can feed off of him, Fernandez can run in behind, whatever it's going to be. If it's going to be a bit more of a back to goal, a bit more of a link player. But if it's going to be that person who's going to be the spearhead and score goals, I think unless you're going for an Ekiteke, you're going for a Delap, you're going for players of that caliber and standard, who aren't. It's not a Haaland level player that is almost guaranteed to be. You would have been unbelievably surprised if he flopped at City. There's no real guaranteed position, I think, in Europe. So I think that is probably where I'm down in terms of striker position, is that they're paid to make those decisions. We can all have an opinion on it. I don't think personally, and even speaking to people within the game, that there is a slam dunk prospect that is out there. Arsenal look like they're going to sign Sesko from Red Bull. He has an unbelievable shot on him, but I don't know if he's going to be the answer at Arsenal. Victor G, again, phenomenal record in Portugal. Stylistically, is he going to be do the same thing at Chelsea? The goals that he scores, the type of goals are not really Chelsea kind of situations. You can make knocks and you can make positive comments for lots of different players. I think ultimately they'll buy one, maybe two players, and we just got to hope really that one of them comes off. The only other thing I can say is there that I am very much of the opinion, and this is very much based on very little that I've seen in terms of his career, but I have a feeling, I'm saying I want a goal scoring wide player that potentially Jackson might shift and see how that works. Give him, there is talk of him potentially being sold, and you see stuff happening at the moment, but I would give him an opportunity to look where he looks, what does it look like from the left-hand side? If he's got a big lump up front or something that he can play off of, maybe he scores goals, maybe he's threatening, just see what's there. But two centre forwards, I think Chelsea will get, and then potentially Jackson is that sort of tweener between being a winger and a bit of a striker. But it's not an easy situation this summer. I think probably it's fair to say that, and as much as I do like to hound the recruitment really since they've been at the club, I don't think this is a situation where I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is a shit decision, because I don't think there's a perfect one. It may be Osimhen, but not at the money. And as I say, he for me is the one that I would like to get, but not on the money, not on the wages, because then you are really banking on him being absolutely unbelievable. The only chance you've got is if John Obi Mikel can smuggle him in, but I don't think Mikel's quite got that level of influence these days. But we'll see how this.
I agree about, it's just such a complex one. So I actually don't mind the club going for two strikers in this situation. And I like the attributes of Delap. And I think, in a market, you just look at we sold Havertz to Arsenal for like 65 million. Yeah. And he barely scored 10 Premier League goals. And Delap's just scored 12 Premier League goals for an Ipswich team that were relegated basically before Christmas. Or were destined for relegation, for a long period of time. And I had a conversation, funny enough, earlier today with Benjamin Bloom. I don't know if you know him. He covers Ipswich. He covers the Championship. And, he sort of said, don't judge Delap on who he plays for, judge him based on his goals. And I like the fact that Delap in the Premier League, he's got all those physical attributes that I think Chelsea fans naturally love about a centre-forward. But also the style of goals he has scored for Ipswich, who are not a ball-dominant team in the Premier League. They've had to, they've taken a lot of beatings this season. Unfortunately, not from Chelsea. And you look at the style of player he is, I think it is a low-risk, hopefully high-reward signing. When you factor in 30 million for a guy who scored 10 or so in the current market, I know 10, 15 years ago, it would have been mad, right? But we're not living in that age anymore. So whether it is, Ekiteke, I guess the argument for say Ekiteke or someone like that is then maybe you're looking for an alternative option to Delap, but I'm also of the belief, I don't know if you are as well, that it's more like looking at, okay, what does Enzo Maresca want from his centre forward? What are the things that I had a conversation with someone recently about Liverpool, and clearly Liverpool have used data arguably the best in recent years. They clearly are able with their signings to use the data in the right way to appreciate how that player is going to translate his skills from usually a foreign league to the Premier League. And that Chelsea have been very difficult at, just failed a number of times doing that, right? So what is it about Ekiteke in the Bundesliga that makes him suitable for Chelsea based on how you're going to ask him to play? I think surely that's kind of one of the big things for me of, I don't care who it is, can we just clarify what we're going to be asking this guy to do? Because he can score a bunch of goals in the Bundesliga, but as Timo Werner proved, you can score a lot of goals in the Bundesliga. That doesn't mean you're going to be a suitable striker for Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think just 2 points on this. I think Maresca likes Delap. there was a lot of talk about Maresca being very, very high on him, and I think he was even very sort of. I think you're giving him a lot of praise in the press conference, if memory serves me right, a little bit earlier in the season as well. So I think in terms of profile, in terms of the kind of player that he would like, I think Delap probably ticks a lot of boxes. At least from a stylistic perspective. The argument for Ekiteke that I would make in his favour is probably just, I think, one of the translatable skills, and it's not necessarily something that shows up in data, and you would have to have scouts really, really watching this, is how well does your striker find that half a yard of space to get a shot off? And this is, again, for all of the people who used to talk about Diego Costa in a negative light, sort of external to Chelsea, this was a guy who honestly could find that yard of space anywhere in the penalty area with either foot and just find the space. It wasn't like a beautiful kind of Brazilian-esque piece of skill that he would do. It was just he just had this knack of creating that space. It's so very similar to Aguero. Aguero is a slightly different type of player, but transferable skills that you're looking for is how do they create space? How do they create opportunities themselves? How do they create that shooting angle for them to get shots off? And when I watch Ekiteke, for all of the stuff he does well, and I think all of the stuff that actually probably is a byproduct of playing in Germany as well, which I would be very much like, okay, let's really dig into some of these attributes that people are saying are positives. What I have noticed with him is it's the all types of goals is the first thing that I like to see in a centre forward. So it's not just tap-ins or cutbacks he's scoring from, or in Timo Werner's case, running from the halfway line 35 times a season, as German teams play a suicidal high line and just using his pace and scoring. Lots of variation in his sort of goal catalogue. Decent level of assist brings others into play, but it's just that ability to generate space, which I think again makes him an interesting prospect. The thing that I would have against him is that I think he's deceptively strong, but that physicality standpoint, how is he going to hold up against some of these absolute units that are playing, Arsenal's two centre halves, when they're on form and fit? How is he going to cope with them pushing him all around the place? Dan Burn, who's like 8 foot tall. There are players that in the Premier League you just don't come across in other divisions. So the physicality standpoint, I think, is one thing that I'm looking at. But and this is also, I guess, true of Delap in a sense as well. How they create space for themselves is the number one thing. You think about Chelsea, you think about where we struggled, you think about the games where we have, been camped almost in the final third for a game. And sometimes it's like find a little pass and Jackson maybe takes a bad touch and gets tackled. You're looking for a player that can take one touch, create an angle and get a shot off, and do that regularly and do that with high quality. Those are the kind of players that are difference between draws and wins and turning some of those, high pressure moments into goals as well. So I think that's what I'm looking for in terms of these players. So I say I think Osimhen would have been the perfect candidate because he's very good at that. He's shown it at Napoli, shown it in Turkey. He'll probably show it in the Saudi League. He'll probably score 1 million goals in the Saudi League if he goes there and gets his 3 million quid a week or whatever it is that they're offering him. But I think that's the thing I'm looking for, because when I think about the chances that we've created, and I know, the quality of chances we create is generally quite high in the league. Having somebody who's just got that little bit more quality and a little bit more ability to find the space is going to be the key thing. So that's what I'd say about Ekiteke. And I think Delap, the reason that I'm quite happy with him coming, I just think that Maresca really likes him. And I think he's earned at least, maybe Dewsbury Hall is a counterpoint here, but he's maybe earned at least one player potentially now that he's worked with previously in some capacity that he can bring in. And if he's very positive about Delap, and as I say, there is a Costa-like quality to him that I really do enjoy, and I hope if he can get anywhere near that level, obviously we'll be buzzing and we'll be flying in the league. But there is that hope that he can kick on at a better club in a better environment as well.